tell us something about your life, family, and work.
Hi, well, my name is Katie. I'm a coach and a change facilitator and a consultant. I work under my own brand name of Blink 50. I actually live in the northwest at the moment of England, but until December, I was living in Sussex and had been there for some time. But I was actually brought up in the northwest by self-employed parents and was one of 5 children. And we had a very strong work ethic, quite a disciplined life. Both my parents were very busy consistently. And, we had chores to do in the home. We had jobs to do to earn our pocket money. So even though my parents were quite well off and we had a good life, there was a really strong work ethic and there was a lot to do to learn how to be independent and responsible. And, I'm really grateful for that now later on in my life, because it set me up to be somebody who can operate from that place. So, yeah.
That's great. The next question, what's your setup for work and how you start each day during the pandemic? Now I'm talking about the pandemic because before pandemic, it's a different situation. So regarding the pandemic, so what's your setup for work now and how you start each day?
Okay, so my setup has had to adapt as a parent as the whole pandemic thing has evolved. So just straight away from the start, loosening my grip on how my day looks and how I set my day up has had to probably be the most significant thing. Understanding that I'm not in complete sort of control of my routine from a certain time in the morning to a certain time in the evening, that the routine has had to adapt to the times and the challenges that it's brought. So kind of letting go of routine, really, Atif, but understanding within that what actually makes me work well and putting those conditions into pockets of time in my day. So, when I have a morning of work or an afternoon of work or some work pops into my day, sometimes in the evening, I understand the conditions of my game that help me step up to that really well. So I sort of have these movable conditions that I can plug in anywhere I am now, which is, fantastic. And just set up my surroundings, communicate with people around me well, which is key. This is what's happening. This is what I'm going to be doing. This is when I'm going to be available. So a lot of it is really about communication because my setup is very mobile.
So just now you mentioned that you'll be communicating with a lot of people. So how is this communication going on right now? Like what kind of modes are you using for this communication?
What you mean, what do we communicate through? Sort of apps and phone calls, that kind of thing?
Yes, means like now you have changed your communication modes. First you were meeting everybody physically. Now is it like something different? Are you still going meeting everybody physically, or it's
well, actually my work had transitioned a lot into so my one-to-one work was pretty much all by phone and occasionally video. So it's quite an intense process for people when they're entering a really private space of change over a period of time. So when I work with people one-to-one, we are setting out on a kind of mission, if you like, and it's usually quite significant. And it's actually, sometimes people find this hard to believe when they're outside the process. It's actually easier to do that over the phone because literally you're not thinking of anything else, both sides of the conversation now, other than what you hear and what you feel and what you think and what you want to say. There's nothing else. So, I transitioned most of my one-to-one work onto phone call quite some time ago anyway, so I was set up for that. And then occasionally I would meet clients, go up to London or go and meet a client sort of when they've been with me for a few months so that we could have an in-person meeting. The work that I do with businesses and teams, obviously, was a little bit more challenged because not being in the workspace, but they were challenges that were being met both sides. So that kind of work has transitioned to video straight off. But I think everybody in the kind of anybody that you're working with in a commercial sense, not in a personal and private sense, was having to face that themselves. Everyone was in a state of imperfection. It was just, how could we continue the communication? That's the most important thing. How can we continue the communication? So that's been phone calls, video calls, WhatsApp messages, emails. It's just playing with that and finding something that really works, but setting boundaries around it. Because I think one of the biggest challenges actually when you lose the structure of what you do, however that structure used to be, is you lose your boundaries. There's this kind of understanding of boundary when you're working in a certain way and you don't have these restrictions of not being able to meet people, that even though work's not necessarily 9 till 5 or Monday to Friday, if you don't work in that way, there's still some sense of boundary with work and, relaxation and home and family. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge that has had to sort of been stepped into place is a sense of available on all channels, but let's work this so that we're all working in a really container kind of style of way. Very
true. So is there any method of avoiding the distractions? You adopted any specific distraction methodologies so you can avoid the distraction during the day or the work hours? I will say the work hours, how you just do these, avoid the distractions?
Okay, well, I suppose I'm fortunate in my training as a coach and a facilitator anyway. I've gone through a lot of process about helping people restructure their lives. So the first thing, and their businesses and their careers. So the first thing that I knew I had to do in order to stand strong for people who were working with me is that I had to implement the things that I had learned to create, some core strength in my day. So that, because people depend on me to be strong, stable, consistent, that kind of thing. So for me, the techniques that I introduced were more the kind of techniques that you would offer really high performing people who want to really sharpen their performance up that tiny bit more. And there are things like this. So the night before I'm about to do some work, even after having some family time, I will make sure I have some quiet time in the evening where I can make an achievable list for the next day. And I will, it won't have more than 5 things on it, 3, 4 or 5 things. And I put the most significant or challenging thing at the top of that list.
Great.
Okay. And then when that list is ticked off within a time frame, so I'm trying to put that within 2 or 3 hours max, because that's the other thing, creating this container of a deadline for yourself when your space is open and mixed with tasks. Okay. So, a 2 or 3 hour space of focused time where there are 3, 4 or 5 tasks to be achieved. Once that's done, you kind of get a real hit of achievement. And it's the first thing that you've done in your day. So obviously as parents, this is more of a challenge, and it depends how old your children are.
So true.
But it's about, if you can't do it in 2 or 3 hours, it's about thinking what you can possibly most likely achieve. So it's setting a high standard, but then being realistic about how to structure that in your day so that you're most likely to achieve it, so that you're not setting yourself up to fail. That's probably the most significant thing I've done, which is something that you would encourage people who are really at a high level of performance to sharpen up the edges of what they're doing. It's usually in the practice of setting up their day.
Excellent.
Their expectations of their day. Yeah,
amazing. That's an excellent answer. I myself got something new from this. It's amazing advice as well. So are you leading by example to protect others in your daily life? That's a personal question.
Yeah. Again, I engage in my own support with some amazing people who help me let me rephrase that, who help me understand the benefit of stepping into responsibility. And that sounds like a really heavy, onerous thing, but actually it's very liberating, because as soon as you impulse, and it takes support and learning and practice, that everything in your experience in terms of your society, the world, your own little life, your family, your work, is of your own creation. So I'm getting to a point here with this, Atif. There's some level of responsibility for what's happening everywhere for you. Whatever's happening in the world is partly to do with me, you know. So I think embracing that, what this comes back to is communication. You know, if you're about to step into, you're about to give up smoking, for example, or you're about to do something really significant that's going to take personal discipline, which is what this pandemic has called on us to do, to make choices and instill discipline. It's best if you can communicate that. So as soon as you vocalize your intention to do something that feels challenging or difficult, you've kind of made a worldly commitment. So the first thing I did, and I have reinforced at different stages along the way, and I'm not perfect, but it's just about revisiting this all the time and sort of refining it, is, you know, for example, sit down with my teenage son and say, right, sweetheart, just obviously you've seen what's going on in the world. You know what's going on in the world. It's affecting all of us in different ways. This is how I think we need to be responsible and why. Because this is the finest, you know, the finest understanding of our self-responsibility is that, you know, we all impact each other. So Granny and Granddad are very vulnerable people. Can you imagine if they went to the shop and somebody didn't care that they were vulnerable people? How would you know, that kind of thing. And it's not making it heavy. It's saying, you know, Mama's going to find this challenging, and this is what I propose to do. And this is what we're going to do, you know, as a family. And embracing it as a team, because, you know, we all have to be in the difficulty together, and we all have to be communicating how that feels and what we're intending to do about it. And as soon as you vocalize it and make it a team effort or a concerted effort between different people, and even if you're isolated, you know, communicating your intention of your responsibility is to people on the phone or in some way is what will help you stay with it on a daily basis. So that's the way that we all set example, I think.
So true. Mm-hmm. So to the next question, do you think will everything go back to the way it was pre-pandemic, or this pandemic will live with us forever?
Okay. Well, this is going to sound strange because a lot of people suffering in different ways. You know, we're all having different layers of experience to this. So it's really important to be conscious of that. But I hope it doesn't go back to the way things were. You know, I hope this is that the certain blessings that come from something that's really difficult over time. So as human beings, if we have a very short period of difficulty, we can return to the way things were. And of course, that's have its benefit, because the difficulty gets released and we get some of our pleasures back. But if we're forced into situations, you know, which a lot of people choose to enter with me in order to make considered change in their lives, if we enter a significant period of challenge, and we manage to adapt through that, there are bigger rewards than going back to our old state and our way of being, because that's really what growth is about. If you enter that sort of tunnel, and we're being forced to, you know, as soon as we get a little release, we're being pulled back and put back into place. And if this doesn't apply to people who are suffering with illness, obviously, or whose relatives have died, this isn't a recommendation, you know, that I'm making, but generally for most of us who are managing our way through this, but with some stress and difficulty, there is going to be a huge reward by staying with it and learning how to adapt. If we can say to ourselves, what will I benefit from by sticking with this and learning to adapt? Then we know that there's some reward at the end of that. And hopefully that will reach us forward into a new way of behaving, communicating with each other, being in the world, you know, our expectation management, all these sorts of things. How wonderful in a way that we're being forced to face all those things that we wouldn't do because they're uncomfortable otherwise.
That's altogether a new answer I've got from that's amazing. That's a new prospect I've got from you. So one last question. It's about how you suggest that we protect against the risk of a future pandemic. That's more of a, not I'm asking as a professional, But as a person, how do you think, like, how can we avoid such future pandemics? Just as a person.
Yeah. Well, obviously the one umbrella word for that, but that's a bit overused in the world right now, is just coming to a more considered sense of awareness in our days, generally. You know, the more grateful we can be for what we already have, the more compassionate we can be to other people who are in different circumstances or who respond differently to the same situation for their own reasons, the more sort of humility we can bring into our lives, you know, to understand that we are part of one great big thing. This is not something that's happening against us.
So true.
You know, we are part of one great big thing, and everything that happens and occurs is we're all related to it happening and to our response to it. So I think it's a combination of just slowing down. And I know that's the hardest thing. I know that's the hardest thing for everybody to do, because we're all striving to be the best we can be, to make our lives the best. While we're here on this planet that's all strong, makes us feel powerful. And that's all really significant. We don't have to let go of those things, but just slowing down to understand appreciation, you know, bringing practices into our lives while it's difficult, because when it's easy, we'll always let go of practices and routines in order to have a good time. While it's difficult, you know, if we can all embrace some level of gratitude and humility and compassion.
So true.
Those things will carry us through, not just as individuals, and open up our hearts to not being so separated, but collectively. If we can use this to sort of, you know, be more compassionate to people and situations around us, and understand that we are all interconnected, that practice will carry us through anything. Obviously, you know, like I said before, people falling ill, losing loved ones, you know, there's no advice to give to people like that. They're going through something, and I'm not a grief counsellor. I'm not that kind of, you know, but what I'm saying is anything we can instill in ourselves as a gentle discipline right now will help us be set for anything that comes to us in our lives that provides a great challenge.